Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Essential Pause. If you've been following along, I've spent the last couple of episodes laying the foundation for what it means to pause, whether in moments of discomfort, when we feel like we should have it all figured out, or when we're trying to show up with more intention. Today, I'm shifting this format into a conversation, and I'm excited to share an episode that I recorded with Dr. Es Swihart. In this episode, we explore what we sometimes call the messy middle. If the earlier episodes introduced the pause as practice, something you can begin to notice and build, this conversation expands on that idea. Es and I talk about the real-life experiences of trying to pause in the middle of all the motion, sometimes the commotion, the relationships, the deadlines, and the chaos. It's not always neat, but these micro moments, those little choices to stop, notice, and reflect are where change begins. What I really love about this conversation is that it bridges the theory I've been talking about with lived experiences. You'll hear us share some stories, examples, and some honest reflection about the challenges of just being human in motion. So, as you listen, I invite you to think back to your week. Where have you already had a pause? Maybe you didn't even name it that way at the time. Was it a breath before responding, a walk between meetings, a moment you noticed something about yourself or someone else? That's the work we're unpacking today. So let's dive in. So before we start, we're going to take a pause, Es. We're going to take a breath. Because we all have really busy lives. And sometimes you need even just a short transition to move from one space to the other. So think of a moment today that felt ordinary or quick. Pouring your cup of coffee, opening your inbox, walking into a room. What did you notice? What didn't you notice? That's what this is all about, essential pauses. We're going to start really small today, Es. I mean, really small. We're talking about the moment before the moment, the space that we said earlier between stimulus and response. Almost like a blink of an eye where everything can shift if we were just paying attention. And I know when we prepped for this, we were like, oh, we have so many stories. Where do we start?
Every day there's more.
Every day there's more. So today, I feel like the word of the day is autopilot. And we are going to explore when we're on autopilot, how to get off autopilot. And maybe there are even some times where autopilot isn't such a bad thing. But there are definitely some times when you shouldn't be on autopilot. But I don't like that word should. You'd be better served to turn autopilot off intentionally. Like what I did there. I changed that language.
I loved it with intention.
With intention. Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Es, because you are a co-host and I'm allowed to put you on the spot with that. I would love for you to share with our listeners a moment where you missed the in-between and reacted. You were on autopilot.
So actually, this is one that had occurred to me about a day or two ago that I've missed multiple times in a row. Okay. So I recently got married, which was very exciting. I eloped. And when I eloped, I hired, it was just myself and my now husband and my daughter. And we were on a lovely little cliffside in BC, Canada. And I hired an elopement specialist and it came with a photographer.
Wait. An elopement specialist? This is a thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Sea to Sky officiant, if anybody needs a really amazing elopement. Okay. Well, I don't know if it's a specialist. I might be titling her wrong, but she's fantastic. Her name's Jude. I highly recommend. Okay. The package came with a photographer. So it was Jude, us, and then this wonderful photographer. And the first moment that I missed was how on autopilot I am when I'm having my photo taken. I really don't like it. And I am not in my body. I'm really avoidant. And then that also translated to something I have missed my whole life. And I've missed it several times since, is people asking to see photos because they want to see photos of this joyful moment that no one got to attend.
I still want to see photos, by the way.
Yes. So So what I've realized is I'm just as awkward showing people photos, and I go really fast if I'm flipping through them on my phone, and people are like, whoa, 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 wait. And I'm just sort of moving in on myself, and it's an autopilot, automatic thing that I do because I'm really uncomfortable in that space. So I just recently have noticed this. I haven't shown pictures since, so I haven't played in the space of choosing my own adventure on how I'm going to approach that conversation, or just leaning into the discomfort and seeing what I find there, because I'm normally just so uncomfortable. I'm trying to avoid, and that's why I'm going fast.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many nuggets in there, right? I mean, I wrote that book during the pandemic, that Dancing with Discomfort. And something that the literature said everywhere I looked was that the human condition with discomfort is, I'm thinking about those monkeys that have like their hands over their ears, their eyes, their mouth. It's like, run, avoid, ignore, run as fast as you can through it, run as fast as you can around it, right? And so that autopilot often kicks in because I feel like it's like shaking it off. Like we just can't manage the discomfort, or we won't, or we don't want to, or I know we're going to talk about later, like there are things that have happened that make it really hard for us to be in that space. So that autopilot is sometimes a response to, oh my gosh, I just need to get through this discomfort. And I can say I have had way too many experiences that you're describing, not exactly with the photos, but like as, you know, working with other individuals or taking on a leadership role. I have a really hard time. I'm a pleaser. I know this about myself. And my wife keeps telling me that as a leader, you cannot wait for everybody to be happy with you. You know this as a leader because it won't work. Mm-hmm. So my autopilot kicks in when I'm having to deliver a piece of information that I know part of the group is not going to be excited about. And I run right through it. You know, which is crazy, Es, because you know me, I want to be collaborative. I want to hold space for voices. I want to explore this topic. Not when I think that they're mad at me. I don't.
And you are very clear. You're somebody who's very clear and intentional with how you move through information. So that's very off brand for you, Carey. Yes.
So off brand. And this is an interesting situation similar to yours, which is there are places in our lives where we can have awareness around the autopilot and the autopilot still kicks in. What I'm learning, and now that I'm saying this out loud, having that awareness is so important.
Vital.
And it's not sufficient. It's like, I'm thinking about like, I'm not a scientist, but like scientists will talk about sort of the necessary and sufficient conditions to move something. Like awareness is necessary, but it is not sufficient to sort of change that autopilot. So
it's the first step, right? Like it's the spark of awareness that, in Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa says something, I'm going to get the quote a little wrong, but it's something about just awareness begins to bring light to a situation and dehydrate it. And I love that because it's once you see, you can't unsee, right? So it's that first step, but then it really is about doing that work, which is hard and feels challenging, but is ultimately, I'll be curious if this applies to your autopilot of running through things as a leader in uncomfortable, hard conversations where you know you're going to upset people. What I realized once I saw it, and I mean, you're talking about something that I've probably been doing my whole adult and probably teen, like adolescent life till now. I've probably always been on autopilot in this uncomfortable, cringy way with getting my picture taken and showing pictures. Is that when I follow this elopement specialist on Instagram now. So I also get to see all these other couples getting married, and I'm looking at women who on their wedding day were like having fun and owning it and being present in their body. And then I was like, oh God, I missed my window. And what I realized is that autopilot actually is creating it's self-sabotaging, like it's circling back and creating the thing I'm afraid of in the first place. It's that lack of awareness in that autopilot that's making me look weird and uncomfortable in these photos.
Oh, yes, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. And if I had known more about the pause and known more about that intentionality before and applied it in this area, I mean, who knows? Maybe I would take pictures like Naomi Campbell. I don't know. Someone
and you
like
would slowly scroll through and let your friends and family take in what they're seeing, right? And maybe you're reliving the experience through the photos because they truly are good memories, not, critical evaluation of who you were on that day.
But what I know, to your point from this work, is it's me knowing this doesn't mean the next time there's a camera in front of me, I'm going to be not on autopilot. If anything, I might be weirdly, now I'm in the between space of like autopilot and awareness of the autopilot.
Yes.
But I have to now do that work to figure out, well, what is it about me that is hiding or scared or uncomfortable? Like, why am I uncomfortable in that space? What's in there that I'm not conscious of yet? And how can I pull that up?
Yeah.
And that's that work that I know you and I have talked about this quote before. There's an Ani DeFranco quote that I love so much where she says, I have to crawl through the desert between when I can hear it and when I can play it with my hands. Mm. And that resonates so much for me that sometimes we know where we want to go, and we even know why we're not there, but learning through the desert of how to get there is that self-work before we can really make things sing. So,
I love that quote. I will say I heard, I was talking to a colleague the other day who's also an artist, creative, and they were telling me that when they were taking art classes, one of the things the instructor said is there will be moments in the process of painting where your painting will have an ugly stage. And what you do as an artist is you continue to work through and know. And I feel like as two people who have gone through doctoral programs, there are plenty of ugly, drafty stages in that process. And so I hadn't thought about it until you said the Ani DeFranco quote, but that's kind of what this work is at a really granular, microscopic level, right? Is that there's awareness, right? Then you're in this like liminal space, right? This in between, that's the ugly, drafty desert space of the work, which is experimentation. It's trying, it's failing. It's like, and so our ability to sit in that space is what gets us to the place where we want to be. And it's so hard because like in my example, I happen to say like contextually in a leadership role, but look, if I'm being really honest, anybody who I care dearly about in terms of what they think of me, you could replay that autopilot. I remember when my wife and I decided we were going to move our family to Massachusetts. I did not want to disappoint my mom, who lives in Maryland, and I knew that I was moving away and, her grandkids were little, and I knew how hard that was going to be, and I delayed and delayed and delayed, tried to avoid, and that was just an automatic response. And at the time I was in therapy, which was great. I love therapy. And, my therapist was supporting me and thinking about like, how do I reframe what I'm trying to say, that it's not just disappointment. So yeah, I think that autopilot, is real. I have a question for you though. So in the intro episode, I told the story of running, and I told that story, I will say, with a little pride, because I notice, I pause, and I adjust. Mm-hmm. And so the question I have for you is, what's different about my experience as needing to please people and not being able to adjust, and running and being able to adjust? Because I think that's important to also notice. Like, what's different about those contexts, I wonder?
Well, some of that is, I think, the process where we do the work, right? So it's really interesting because before we started recording, when we were having our pregame, we were talking about, I was sort of saying how at this point in the work, I am a lot more conscious. Like I notice a lot more than I did before I started doing the work. And that's just part of that integrative process. And sometimes I'm on an autopilot, or I'm moving into an autopilot, and I still move into it, but there's another part of me that's going, oh, look at what you're doing right now. And it still doesn't stop it, but I am seeing it, right? Which is its own fascinating place. And it often will slow down the momentum of that autopilot, or I will adjust after I've moved into it a bit. And sometimes I don't autopilot at all. I see it and I'm able to make that change.
Yeah.
I think there are probably just a whole lifetime's worth of things that we can find those autopilot moments, even surprising ourselves as we're doing the work. So the instance with the picture, for example, was one that was so common for me. It wasn't even on my radar. I wonder, for like, when you ask that question, where in your personal practice of running and being able to look at your personal process that's not outside in the world with others as explicitly, right? Yes. Versus where you are in a space that is more, where the judgment's not just the self necessarily, it's potentially others, right? My picture example is very much that way. It's like, it's vulnerable. It's out with people.
Yes.
Very often the root of those autopilots are protective, and they are coming from that sense of self-worth that we have, where we feel potentially vulnerable, or where we fear getting judged, which is also always the fear of rejection or disconnect, which I think is also biological for us. Like we are wired to belong, to want belonging. That goes to the belonging work, and everything gets interconnected. And when we fear that we may be judged, and it's a place that we haven't moved through the work to really dig in to the beliefs we might have around our own sense of worth, or where we're taking in that stimuli from others and granting it, we're, a friend of mine always uses that phrase, like taking up rent without, or taking up space without paying rent. We have that experience going on with others. I think we move much more into protective spaces.
That resonates for me, because I think running is a solo engagement. Usually for me, I enjoy the quiet of running by myself and not being in that comparison game with other runners. And so I think you're onto something there. And I know you've spent many years, in your doctoral program studying self-worth, and I'm sure it's related to, that vulnerability of like being seen by others and worrying about how you're being seen, versus when I'm running, well, other than my family, no one really even knows I'm out there. So like, there isn't that worry of, is somebody going to see me struggling, or do I have to put on airs or show to like, a certain facade. I'm intrigued. I have to say, I'm intrigued by this awareness is necessary but not sufficient piece of this, right? We've had so many conversations about this, and I don't know that we've ever said it that way. So I'm sort of sitting with that idea. I mean, I think I have similar experiences that you do around the phrase that came up for me when I was listening to you was, you just can't unring that bell. Right. Yep. Once you've started to, even in small ways, practice awareness, you can't forget that you're now trying to be more aware. It doesn't mean that you always do it in the moment that maybe you'd hope you'd do it, but there is some awareness that crops up. And it kind of reminded me, and I wanted to ask you, it's like when you learn something new, or you start studying something more deeply, and the more deeply you get into it, the more you realize you know so little about that topic. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is sort of analogous to this, in that like you're building this awareness, and then you're realizing, oh my gosh, there's a lot that I'm not paying attention to and that I could be paying attention to. And so, I mean, it is a transition, right? It's like a real, and it can be super uncomfortable for a long period of time for people.
There's a natural part of our protective internal mechanism that comes up with resistance, and the resistance is often unconscious, and it can take a variety of forms, right? There's a part of us that doesn't want to do the work, and not only is the work uncomfortable and scary sometimes and disorienting, and you have to, I love that analogy of the painting, right? You have to move into the ugly part in a world where we have been taught, we see this all the time in education. We see it in our kids. I don't know how many people listening with their kids see the reinforcement of the end result has to be perfect. And what ends up happening is kids shut down. They don't want to take the risks, because if I don't get it right, that means that I'm not good. And it really starts there. And so moving into that space of that discomfort of just noticing is in some ways disoriented and dangerous. And we have to be in that ugly space in a world where we've been trained and coded to tell us that there's something wrong with us if we're not beautiful in all areas of our life. We're supposed to be everything to everyone without flaw. Yeah. So that's its own sort of challenge as we move through. And then the noticing, I think that this idea of it's not just noticing is not enough, right? It's not sufficient. It keeps building on itself. It's almost sometimes it's amazing. We started this episode, you brought up being a doctor, and I said, oh, I'll bring that back up. And then I started to tell this picture story, which is sort of newly a noticing for me. And then this doctor thing that I was going to talk about totally separately. Now I'm thinking about, oh, these are completely connected right now. And I'm noticing that live with you in the moment.
Yeah.
And the doctor, the thing with the doctor was when you're moving through the doctorate, you're not thinking about being a doctor at the end. You just are thinking about never having to open that dissertation again, document again, and being able to watch a Netflix show in its entirety. That's all you're thinking about. And so, and, there's this very public thing that happens where, well, what are you going to call yourself? How are you going to put these credentials at the end? And being someone who doesn't like to spend time on her own photos, that was a very uncomfortable place to move for me. And then as I moved into that space and I work with students and in the education space and as well as adults, I had other people's baggage around that idea of doctors move into my world, because I had to figure out, I had people saying, well, are you going to be Dr. Swihart? Are you going to be just Miss Swihart? Are you going to be S. Swihart? Is that a hierarchical thing? Or you need as a woman to say that you're a doctor because you're representing it to other women in the classroom? There was just so much stuff. And I had to suss out, and I still am, because a part of me is, I don't want to draw attention,
Yeah.
So all of that is just to say, it's interesting, this connection that I'm sort of live making because of the noticing, right? Just the noticing and the speaking out loud about the pictures. I can say, oh, the same mechanism is really driving what's behind my discomfort with this title, right? And just because I've noticed that now, I can guarantee you I will not know by the end of this episode or tomorrow how I'm going to feel about that title. It's probably going to take crawling through that desert, sitting in that ugly space, figuring out what it is underneath it before I get movement. But at least now I have some agency in the noticing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to make sure, the noticing that awareness is necessary and not sufficient. I want to make sure that folks listening are clear that they shouldn't feel discouraged if they spend a lot of time in the awareness or noticing phase, right? Because that's huge. The opening prompt, we were asking folks just to pay attention to something they do every day, right? So that shift from I get up in the morning, I'm half asleep, I go into the bathroom and I brush my teeth, versus I'm going in the bathroom and I can see and feel that I'm brushing my teeth. That may sound small, and it's important, because what I have found, Es, is even as we spend a lot of time in the awareness, like you said, there is a lot of agency and confidence that comes in awareness, because the expectation isn't necessarily that you move from awareness to a new thing, like an action. What if part of the progression is you move to awareness in one aspect of your life, you strengthen that awareness to move into another aspect. And so you are working on your awareness muscles. Let's be honest. You are, there's no atrophy here, because you are building that muscle every day. And that is good, hard, beautiful work. So even though it feels at times discouraging, because you're oh my gosh, I'm so aware of how I'm feeling. I know that there's a story here. I didn't take the action that I wanted to take. The fact that you're having that inner monologue, that is powerful and beautiful. And I think if I were going to invite folks to expand their sort of activities around awareness, so if we're talking about awareness fitness, if you'll stay with me on an exercise metaphor for a second, right? So you've been doing some weight training around awareness with yourself, right? Just paying attention. Well, what if you now engaged in a new fitness activity with someone else? And in a moment, in a hard conversation, you said to the other person, like I have with Es or with my research colleague, you know what? This feels really uncomfortable right now. And watch and see what happens. Right? So I guess I just want to make sure listeners hear that there's a lot of expansion available in awareness. It's not discrete. It's not finite. It's not good or bad. It's where what I tell our coaching, so I lead a coaching program, and what I tell our coaches, because they're always worried about, am I progressing enough? Am I doing? And I say, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I think that's true with awareness. Like, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're doing the work that you need to do. So yeah, so I just wanted to say that out loud to make sure there's so much opportunity for expansion and growth in awareness, you know?
And it is the starting point too, right? Like, it is the necessity, and it is so fun and exciting, even when it is hard, because one, you're on a journey at that point, yes. Right?
Yeah.
Which it feels good to be on a journey.
Yes.
And that it's going to improve your life in so many disparate areas. It bleeds into all sorts of other places.
Yeah.
And it's also, you're recognizing something about the self, right? I think about, people, there's so many different forms of, Myers-Briggs or the Clifton Strength Finders, or, what color are you personality wise, or astrology, like whatever, like there are so many ways that we use frameworks to try to talk about who we are and make sense of
Enneagram. That's another one. Like,
yes.
Enneagram, right?
And we relate to these and we feel seen. When you have an insight about yourself and you see it, it's exciting. It's like, oh, I had an epiphany about why I am this way I am. And it's not like, woohoo, I'm super awkward when I take photos. There's something I'm clearly self-conscious about that I get to work on. But it is also woohoo because you say, oh man, I get to tap into this journey into myself that's going to unravel and unlock this sort of, I don't want to be unknown to myself. I want that pause and that awareness.
Yeah, me too. And I do think there are places in our lives that feel easeful to experiment and move forward, and there are places where it doesn't feel. And so if you spend a lot of time in that space, you're still building the muscles and preparing yourselves. It's funny, when you were talking about the doctoral degree and the message that society sends us, I immediately thought about a conversation I had with our oldest, who's going to be in 8th grade next year. And we were talking about the Massachusetts state test, because they're in testing phase right now. And he was saying he has a friend who often doesn't do well on the MCAS because he doesn't want to be in the hard classes, because that's one of the measures that they use. And he said, I don't do that. I try to do well. And I'm like, well, good. You should. We talked about putting your best effort forward. And he said, but, and this is how I'm getting to your story. He said, if I end up in the hard classes and I get a C, I know that you and mom take my phone away, and there are consequences for not doing well in the harder classes. And so what I loved about that conversation is I've been practicing self-awareness enough that even in the car, I could take a pause, have an inner monologue. And my response to him was, well, the consequences were different reasons, not for your knowledge, but sort of missing and being organized. And I said, I imagine that we, including you, would come up with a new system acknowledging that you're in harder classes, that we'd have to rescale what we were thinking about in terms of consequences. I said, what did you think about that? And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm here to tell you that conversation only happened because I spent his 6th grade year making a ton of mistakes. Right? And failing and doing the autopilot and reacting with my type A perfectionist. He didn't get a good grade, I'd get immediately upset. He didn't do this, I'd react, right? And so it's taken me, bless his heart, it's taken me a good year and change to find a place where I could process this with him.
That is such a powerful, beautiful story, and really also, again, demonstrates exactly how that pause has such a wide range of effects. Because prior, right, if it's the year of mistakes on your autopilot, which is your like you were the type A perfectionist, and those things are coming out, and we'll probably talk about this more, our autopilot strategies that got us to some sense of success or approbation or whatever it might be are the things that we hardcore push on our kids, because we want them to take our adaptive strategies, even when they're unconscious and not always productive. We're like, here, this will help you be successful. It helped me, even if it, low-key ruined my life in other areas that I'm not aware of. please take it. And so you move through that, right? Which then in turn can create all sorts of fear-based responses and self-worth responses from our kids and adjustments of the self to fit an external idea or expectation. And instead, though, like taking that year, that learning and that pause, you have a child who can say something like that to you. First of all, which is pretty amazing.
Sure, it is, isn't it?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Then you're also modeling like how to have conversation, how you can make adjustments, how he can advocate for himself in a healthy way.
It was just a regular conversation. I think the other thing interesting, Es, about this part of the conversation, this is why I love our conversations, is I think the other takeaway for me around this, like, it's okay to focus on awareness is, you know, in our sort of messages we receive from society, it's like, you do this, you do this, you do this, you get this. Right. And what I think I believe now that we've said this story out loud is it does start with awareness, because I don't think you can always anticipate what the next step is.
Oh, gosh.
How could I have possibly predicted that I was going to be in the car driving home from climbing with our middle school son, and that would be a conversation? Like, I don't know that's coming up. So I can't necessarily practice the next 2, 3, 30 steps. The only thing I can practice is showing up, being present, and being aware. That's what I can control in those moments.
I think it could be argued in that sense. It's not just the first step, it's the most important, right?
Yeah.
Like you really don't have anything without it. And it is a cascade of noticings, right?
That's a good word for it. A cascade. Oh, I love that. Cascade of noticings.
They just pick up on one another.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And you're never done. You know, I think it's the intuitive but counterintuitive based on all of our training, is that there's some fixed point where we're going to be finished, but it just doesn't work that way. And then sometimes you think, gosh, like, was this who I was all along? And it's so great. But then you also realize there's more, right? That in 5 to 10 years, you'll also continue to grow and evolve. And
I love that idea. And maybe we'll pick this up on a future episode, that you're never done. I mean, I know that can be uncomfortable for a lot of us who like to have discrete accomplishments. And it gives me some solace, though, because, like, I think we've been talking in the context of parents, and I know, you know, not everybody has kids. Even if you're in a long-term relationship with another human being, or a part of a committee in town doing some good work, or a team at work that you've worked with, you can know those people really, really well and still never be done with the relationship, right? I mean, I've been with my wife for 2 decades, and our relationship is still work. And I don't mean work like, work. I mean, it's work. Like, you have to be intentional. You have to put forth effort. You have to bring awareness. And so I think that that's so true. You're just never done.
When I think about that as a parent, I think, you know, you ever the experience as a parent where you read something about, like, at this stage to this stage, everything's fixed, and you think, oh my God, I'm so much better now. If I had known what I know now, like 10 years ago, my child wouldn't need therapy. Which again, I'm very pro therapy. I think everybody's mine's already in therapy. So I like to have a place to talk things out. Yeah. But I think about that in terms of, we are also evolving that with our kids, right? Like, that's my fixed mindset around those external stories. Yeah. And I can't control any of that, but I can show up now, like you did with your son in the car, and I can have the conversation the best way I can right now. And I can hope that it's an even better one in 2 years when she's throwing even crazier stuff my way, because their world gets crazier and crazier. And there is no way to anticipate how this works or goes, right? To your point, it is new and strange in all its capacities. Yeah.
And I mean, in the examples of kids, whether you have your own kids or have kids in your family, as an educator, as a neighbor, a step parent, whatever that looks like, you know, if we got very meta about this, at the end of the day, what really matters is, I hope, I mean, I don't know, of course, but I hope our kids are seeing me process things out loud, and me being willing to say, I really screwed up in that last conversation we had, and I'm sorry. And, when we talk about grades, I say to our middle schooler, well, I'm getting a little upset and I want to talk this through. Like, I'll acknowledge that I have my own emotions about this. So like our son knows, Meme gets upset about grades. He knows that. And he also knows we'll figure a way through it and that I work to be reasonable. So like, again, it's less about outcome and more about like well-regulated, well-supported, I don't know, other human beings in your life, right?
In that space, I was just going to say, I think like neon flashing signs when we're talking about kids, but not just kids, however they show up in your world.
Yeah.
That one, I mean, you are modeling for kids how to treat others and how to be treated and how to move through discomfort, how to move through hard conversations, how to own our stuff. Yeah. But with the other people, which is vital, right? Like just being able to say, I messed up and that makes me okay. Like I'm still okay. Like I'm not a bad person. I can own it without feeling that fear of rejection or whatever. Yeah. But we're also, that's us giving safety to those around us in any way to trust that we can move through hard moments and conversations together with a sense of growth and with a sense of, even if it's hard, that there's safety in coming back to that we're not so far away from one another, really, and that you're going to be able to create a safety, which I think transforms our relationships of all kinds.
Yeah, I would agree. So as I keep coming back to, we both have done research and we're also parents, we're friends, we're daughters, we're practitioners. And so I'd love to sort of start to wind down and leave the listeners with some, if you're sitting there listening and being like, okay, awareness, getting off autopilot, that makes sense. But like, how in the heck do I start? Like, I don't know. Do you have some sort of like things that work for you to like help you sort of shake you off autopilot, or like what, like, I don't know. I feel like as educators, I'm like, if you were supporting, mentoring, teaching, coaching someone in this work, like what kinds of things would you be doing?
I think I would start with asking people to think about, to try to go back. I think it's easier to first go back than it is to try to do it in the immediate right away. So it's really, can you go back and think of a moment in the last week, perhaps, where you got dysregulated in some way? Maybe you were frustrated, or maybe you were upset by something, or maybe you reacted to something in a way that you didn't like, or maybe you shut down and you avoided, or you got scared. We all have sort of different ways of being on autopilot. But thinking of something, or maybe you didn't do much, but you got really judgmental or angry or frustrated or annoyed by something or someone. Maybe it's in traffic, maybe it's a coworker, whatever, right? And then really just start to look at, one, what happened in that moment, and then two, like if you kind of move back into that moment, where can you feel it in your body? Just because as soon as we place things in our body, we ground it a little bit, right? We kind of move into this sense of like, oh yeah, this is impacting we don't even notice in autopilot that it's impacting our central nervous system. And then how did I react next, right? Like what was the thing that I did? Did I avoid? Did I lash out? Did I curse at the driver in front of me? Did I, whatever it might be, right? There's a range. I think that's just the first step. And then from there, try to just see if you can notice yourself in that reactive state the next time that happens, because it will, and it's okay. When you do see it, don't judge it. It's you protecting you all the time.
I think that's a good strategy, right? It's really hard on the fly to be doing these things. But this idea of having a moment to just think about or recount or describe. I mean, maybe like retelling the story to yourself, right? So I think that's a really good tip, and if it feels like too much to take on too many of those questions, maybe just pick a couple, right? To sort of recount the story. Yeah, I love that advice.
I feel like I want to add one thing just to this whole conversation, because when we talk about that small pause and it being the starting place, and that idea of even self-judgment, once our nervous system is kicked on in an autopilot, if we're angry or scared or whatever it might be, we cannot will ourselves back into control. So we have a culture of beating ourselves up afterwards for what we did in that autopilot. But the truth is once you move into that sort of central service takeover of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, you're offline and there's nothing. That's what they always say, right? Like take 20 minutes if you're in a fight to come back because it takes that long to reset. So be good to yourself in that space when your body's in control and you're not. You can't force your way back in. You've got to let your body relax. So.
Definitely not. I think too, I mean, we mentioned this earlier that there are areas of your life where this work will be more easeful. I think even in the practice of reflecting on a moment, take something that was like super joyful or, you know, where you were feeling really good, like in your body and in your mind, and practice with that, right? Like there are opportunities. So we're not asking you to like dig into like the hardest conversation you had with a difficult colleague or on a difficult topic this week. Like start with something, you know, as educators, I feel like we are steeped in asset-based, strengths-based approach. So like lean into like what's good, what's working in life, and use that as a place to start the practice, right? And so just imagine that you were retelling this story to a trusted friend and you're the narrator, you know, and you're, as the narrator, you're having to tell the person who was not there the details of that moment, from the colors, the sounds, the people, the smells, the feelings that you were having. Like see how much detail you can parse out of that experience.
Love it. Notice all the things.
Notice all the things. Yeah. So it's funny because when we were prepping, you know, we had said in the introduction we were going to close with an essential practice. And I will be honest that the initial thought was to find a moment and see if you can pause in that moment. But I want to tweak it based on the conversation we had, which is find something that you did recently that brought you some joyful, celebratory, happy, whatever the right emotion is, energy, some positive energy, and zoom in to that moment and imagine that you're the narrator describing that for somebody who wasn't there. What was present? What was said? What was unsaid? What was heard? If you were outside, what was the weather like? What colors were coming out to you? And then zoom in on yourself. How were you feeling in that situation? Who were you standing or sitting next to? See how much description you can bring to a moment. So write that and then reread it and just think about it. Yeah.
I love it.
I love it too. Oh my goodness. This is amazing. I knew this is why I wanted to start recording our conversations, because there was much said that I had not really processed until I said it out loud to you.
It is always the same. You help me notice all the things.
Well, that's the thing, right? Sometimes I think another tip, right, is finding a trusted other to practice some of this awareness. I mean, this is not about shame yet, but Brené Brown always talks about the best way to reduce or eliminate shame is to shine a light on it. And shining that light on it is telling somebody else, talking about it with someone that you trust and feels safe, right? All right. Is this a good place to end?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Until next time, thanks for listening and making time and space for the pause. Be well.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you just heard, we have a whole universe of podcasts waiting for you. Simply search Dragon Podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. You can also explore our full lineup and discover new shows at podbean.com/dragonpodcasts. That's podbean.com/dragonpodcasts.